On the 19th of March 2003, the night sky over Baghdad was illuminated with what the Americans called shock and awe. It has been 20 years since a coalition of the willing, led by America with support from the UK, Poland and Australia, invaded Iraq following the 9/11 attack on the World Trade Center. Following the al-Qaeda attacks, George W. Bush's administration argued that Saddam Hussein's regime in Iraq should be ended.
I take the fact that he develops weapons of mass destruction very seriously.
I think you can make the case, hypothetically, very theoretically, you can make the case that there are occasions that might require preemptive action.
The Independent took the view that if there was to be a war, the world needed to know why. We highlighted how it was more important than ever to distinguish between the war with Iraq and the wider war on terrorism. On the 15th of February 2003, an estimated 30 million people in 600 cities around the world marched in protest of any invasion. But despite these demonstrations, George Bush offered an ultimatum.
Saddam Hussein and his sons must leave Iraq within 48 hours. Their refusal to do so will result in military conflict.
On the 19th of March, the US launched a military operation, along with their allies, vowing to destroy Iraqi weapons of mass destruction and end the rule of Hussein. Within weeks, the US Army had arrived in the capital, Baghdad, and ripped down a statue of the dictator. And by this point, Hussein had gone into hiding. On the 1st of May 2003, President Bush prematurely declared that the mission in Iraq had been accomplished.
Major combat operations in Iraq have ended. In the Battle of Iraq, the United States and our allies have prevailed.
But it wasn't until December of that year that US forces captured Saddam Hussein, hiding in a hole on a farm near where he grew up in Tikrit. In September of 2004, a multinational investigation into whether Iraq had weapons of mass destruction produced their findings. Known as the Dolfert Report, they found that Saddam Hussein did not possess these weapons at the time of the US invasion. Although coalition forces were successful in removing Saddam, the power vacuum left in his wake saw an increase of sectarian violence between Sunni and Shia Muslims, who were vying for control of the country. In January of 2005, Iraq held its first democratic election, bringing a Shia-dominated government into power and fueling civil unrest further. November 2006 saw Hussein's televised court case streamed by millions. He was charged with crimes against humanity and sentenced to death by hanging, which took place a few weeks later in December. Following the death of Hussein, the civil unrest heightened, and in 2006, nearly 30,000 civilians died, the most deaths in a year since the war began. As a response to this, in 2007, Bush ordered more troops into Iraq to tackle the civil unrest. And in 2008, the US started to withdraw, and later that year, George Bush was replaced with Barack Obama.
And I will soon announce a way forward in Iraq that leaves Iraq to its people and responsibly ends this war.
Within 6 months, troops had been removed from all major cities.
Welcome home. You are now released to join your families. All out.
But there was another group on the horizon. The war had facilitated the rise of extremist groups, such as the al-Qaeda splinter group, known as al-Qaeda in Iraq. When the group leader Abu Musab al-Zarqawi was killed by a US airstrike in 2006, AQI was almost eliminated. However, 7 years later, they regrouped and rebranded as the Islamic State of Iraq, also known as ISIS. In 2014, ISIS launched an offensive in the north of Iraq, capturing Mosul and other areas, and were going to take territory across Syria. The Iraqi government, supported by US airstrikes, aimed to retake territory from ISIS. By December 2017, the ISIS caliphate had lost 95% of its territory, and in March 2019, ISIS were almost completely removed from Syria. As of 2020, more than 9 million Iraqis have been displaced as a result of the US invasion. and it's estimated that between 275,000 and 306,000 civilians died from war-related violence. A further 4,431 US soldiers also died in the conflict. Although officially the war in Iraq has ended, there still isn't peace in the region. People are still questioning the legitimacy of the US-led invasion. Iraqi civilians are still feeling the effects of the devastating civil war, and the relationship between the West and the Middle East is yet to recover.